Hello, everyone, and thank you, Hansel, for that wonderful introduction. Could I also ask you, Hansel, I'm not sure whether all delegates have got the resources. Could you possibly put the link in the chat box just in case,
Okay.
so that, yeah, that would be fabulous, so that the everybody knows where to go to if they are struggling. So, okay, hello everyone. My name is Sue Page. I've already had a chat from Maria. So hello to Maria and everyone else who is attending today's presentation. Today we're going to be talking about paper 3 from the Pearson edX International A-Level English Language. I'm not sure if you've been in the previous two presentations for paper 1 and paper 2, but this is sort of following on from those. This is paper 3. Okay, as I've just said to Hansel there, who's hosting this with me this morning, is the resources that you need. So when I move to the next slide here, I'm going to read this through with you. But while I'm doing that, maybe you can find the resources for this presentation, especially the mark scheme, but more importantly, the actual delegate booklet, because I think everything is in one place for this presentation today. So if you can find that, that would be fabulous. And on the chat box, good morning from various people as well. Looking forward to paper 3. Me too, Abel as well. I've not received the resources, Sarah. I think Hansel is going to put the link on there for you so that you can access it from the chat box. Okay, so if you look for the resources or you click onto the link that I think Hansel's just put, thank you, Hansel, that I will read this slide and let's get sort of comfortable into today's presentation. So this training today is designed to support you, teachers of the Pearson Edexcel International A-Level English Language Specification. We're going to be discussing assessment objectives, which are the most important thing you need to know, what they are, why they're used, and when writing exam papers. We're going to analyse a recent question paper, and I'd like to note at this point that this is taken from the 2024 summer series. And we're going to learn which types of questions match the different assessment objectives that we'll go through as well. We're going to investigate how questions have been answered by looking at feedback from previous exam series. We're going to discuss strategies for teaching and try and make sure students can access questions targeting different assessment objectives. As you can see, everything goes back to these AOs, these assessment objectives. And then towards the end, we'll be networking a little bit and sharing ideas there are some support slides for you as well. So let me tell you a little bit about me. Before we move on to the agenda and then a little welcome from Pearson itself. So my name is Sue, as I told you before. Some of you, I think I might have met face to face when I actually travel and do presentations around the place. I've been teaching both the domestic and the international GCSE and A-level English language and literature throughout Europe and for parts of Asia for a long time, over 35 years now. So more recently, though, I've also worked for Pearson as an examiner and as a trainer. I've lived and worked all over the place, various countries, but I'm now based in southern Spain, where it's supposed to be warm and sunny. However, it is freezing, hence the double layers today. We've had lots of rain. We don't get more than about 35 days a year, but I think they've all happened in the last 35 days. So that is me. Wherever you are in the world, you are very, very welcome. We're at different times of the day, I know. So if you've had a busy day so far and this is the end of your day, I hope you can stay awake for the rest of the presentation. So a couple of hellos in the chat box, and that's nice to see. Opportunity again, yes, from me too. So let us move on. The agenda for today, before our welcome from Pearson, we're going to look at those all-important aims and objectives. Then there's an introduction. We're going to look at the context of the qualification. Again, the assessment objectives, you can see how important they are, can't you? A recent question paper from summer 2024, examples of candidate responses, so real responses, and we're going to look at some marking of these and where you think you can level them. Strategies for teaching, which I will give you throughout the presentation, but also you'll have a chance to share yours as well, hopefully towards the end. And then we will have some questions, networking, and our concluding message from Pearson. I'd like to add that sometime during this presentation, I'm not sure when, the support partner for English, somebody called Stephen Gillespie, will be joining us to introduce himself and to take some questions from you. So to let you know who he is, we have a new person in this role of support partner for English, and I think he's going to drop in at some point during the presentation. So I look forward to that. I've not met him yet either, so that would be really nice. Okay, let's have a welcome to Pearson. Pearson Edexcel. We are the world's leading learning company, and as the UK's largest awarding organisation, we're best placed to provide qualifications aligned to the British educational system. Our qualifications and assessments help to educate millions of people worldwide. We provide innovative textbooks, curriculum materials, multimedia learning tools, IT platforms, and so much more. Professional development, for example, which is where you are at the moment. At the core of everything we do is the desire to make a measurable impact on improving people's lives through learning, and this is globally. Our international heritage stretches back over 150 years, and today we partner with schools, universities, and employers worldwide, offering world-class, globally recognised qualifications to over 3.5 million students a year in over 7 countries. 70, not 7, 70 countries globally, worldwide. Okay, I've just seen a bit of a typo there that I'm going to have to try and get sorted out. Okay, not drawing attention to the screen, but there. Okay, so that's Pearson. The qualification that we're going to be looking at today on paper 3, some general information about it. This A-level language qualification is not a proficiency qualification like, for example, the IELTS. And if you're not familiar with the IELTS, it's the International English Language Testing System. So the qualification we're looking at today is a stepping stone towards more advanced linguistics, and it needs to be approached with that very much in mind. It's far more than the IELTS. The international A-level is very similar to the domestic A-level, and some of the resources are actually very interchangeable. This qualification blends knowledge and skills in an integrated and coherent way. I'm not sure if you are familiar, some of you may be new to this qualification, but you may be familiar that the International A-level can be treated as a modular qualification, with some candidates taking the AS in year 12, for example, then stopping. It can also be taken as a linear qualification where all the papers are studied in 2-year period, and then at the end of year 13, all 4 papers are examined. It's really flexible in terms of in the way it can be approached, and that's very much up to your centre and what suits your cohort and what suits your centre as well. So there is a slide at the end of the presentation which goes into a little bit more detail. And if you're not aware of what an AS is, it's an advanced subsidiary. And that's in the next slide as well, where we talk about the specification itself. Tarek, hello, welcome to you too. I'm trying to multitask. I'm not really a techie person, so if my eyes wander, I'm not wandering. I'm just trying to go down to my chat box. Okay, so the specification, if you do have a copy of the English language, International A-level English language, I've got a printout here. Make sure it's issue 3, please. That's the up-to-date version of it, and that's what you need to be referring to. All the 4 papers are on the table in front of you. Sometimes it's called Unit 1 or Component 1, but I always refer to it as Paper 1 because that is what most people refer to it as, and it's probably more understandable like that because it is Paper 1, Paper 2, Paper 3 and Paper 4. So we've already looked at language, context and identity, which was Paper 1. And then also last week, I looked at paper 2, language in transition in the presentation. And today for this presentation, we're focusing on paper 3, which is crafting language. This is the writing paper. A lot of students actually like this paper because this is where they get to shine. This is where they can show their knowledge, show their skill, and the second part, the section B, then gives them a chance to analyse what they have written rather than what somebody else has written. So a lot of students actually like paper 3. Okay, in the second column there, is it an IAS or an IA2? Well, as I said before, AS is advanced subsidiary and the I just means it's international. So international advanced subsidiary, or is it just the international A2? In order for students to have the complete international A-level qualification in English, they have to have sat all 4 papers. In the right-hand column there, you can see the raw marks for each of the papers is the same. It is 50. That's the marks that are available to the students, and their task is to bag as many as they can. Okay. Papers 3 and 4 are slightly different to the other 2 papers in that these papers are now a little bit longer. Instead of 1 hour 45 minutes, you can see for papers 1 and 2, papers 3 and 4 have 2 hours, so a little bit longer. But apart from that, the setup is the same. There are 2 sections, A and B. Section A is, this time, is the creating their own text, and section B is where they comment on the text that they have created. There are only 2 questions. They don't have a choice. Section A has 1 question and section B has 1 question. They have to answer both. Okay, if you have questions, please type them in the chat box. But let's get a little bit further forwards, and then maybe some of the slides that are coming up may answer your questions before I need to answer them. Okay. All right, so here are those assessment objectives. They are the same for both the AS and the A levels, but as you can see there, the percentages, the weightings are slightly different. So, as I said previously, this is a really important document that the students need to have access to and in-depth knowledge of, because the assessment objectives are the be-all and end-all of the mark scheme. The mark scheme is assessing these points within these students' responses. So this is where the students have to actually target. These are the points they have to actually hit in order to gain those marks that I said previously, to bag as many marks as they can. If they don't know what they're aiming for, then their text becomes quite superficial, it waffles a bit, it doesn't focus on anything. But when the students know what they have to focus on in each of their responses, that's where they can gain those higher bands. And when they do focus on the different assessment objectives, they need to make sure that they are accessing them as effectively as possible. So for example, in assessment objective 1, this is the understanding assessment objective, and they're here where they have to show that they can analyse what they have read and understood, but they have to use associated terminology and write with coherent expression. By this, I mean that they can't say the text is about. They have to use the appropriate terminology. We'll go into the various terminology in the mark scheme a little bit later. If you've already been in the 2 previous presentations, a lot of this is interlocking, it's overlapping information. So by now you'll get more used to what I'm talking about. So their information has to be accurate and relevant in order for those candidates to have the chance to access those higher bands. AO2 is demonstrating critical understanding of the concepts and the issues. AO3 is analysing and evaluating, and that's an important word that I will talk about much later, how contextual factors and language features are associated with the construction of meaning. AO4 is the comparison assessment objective, where the students are exploring connections across texts informed by linguistic concepts and methods. And then the one that's really important for today's paper is A05, where the students are demonstrating their own expertise and creativity in their use of English to communicate in different ways. So this is their writing skill, ability, content, and how they write and what they write. This is the A05. And that's the one that we will be looking at in section A. But as I've said previously, very hard copy kind of girl. I like hard copies, and I always have a copy of this that I refer to constantly, because when the students know that I am so sure that they need to know this, and they can see how much I need to know it so that I can pass that knowledge on to them, when they realize the significance of it, they're not just throwaway comments from me, that I actually refer to this constantly. They get the gist of how important this actually is. And many students that I talk to, and I say, "You're aware of the assessment objectives?" Kind of, sort of. No, they need to know them upside down, inside out, and back to front. I think I've made my point there, haven't I? Okay, so now we're going to look at the context of this paper. As I've just said, the context of the assessment objectives. Why do we use them? Well, they are used to ensure that consistency is achieved across different qualifications in the same subject. And that means that it doesn't matter what the exam board is, whether it's Pearson or AQA or whatever it is, we're all working off the same basis, if you like, the same field of play, that everybody is off that same page, that everybody knows what's important. So those assessment objectives are the same for everybody. And this actually is an off-qual requirement. This isn't an option. This is a requirement. In this way, fairness is achieved throughout every qualification. There is clarity of information, and the construct, which is also the subject itself, is tested appropriately. So those assessment objectives cover the whole of the subject. Nothing is left out. The whole of the assessment objectives cover every part of it, and therefore validity is achieved. There are stated reference points for paper setters, examiners, teachers, and candidates. So when new texts are sourced, they have to make sure that it covers all of these assessment objectives before it can be used in an examination. The assessment process runs effectively during often pressurised periods of the year. And as you may be aware, it might be for you the May to July period that is really busy. Teachers are always busy, aren't we? We're always looking for ways to have some help and support for what we do. Okay, so what is assessed there and where in the IAL language exam? And this is an important piece of information just to give you an overview of what is assessed in each of the papers. And as you can see in paper 1, all the assessment objectives are assessed. In paper 2, assessment objective 5, where the students write their own text, wasn't assessed because they didn't have to write their own text in paper 2. This one today, you can see that the weighting on A05 is high because that's section A, and then AOs 1, 2, 3, and 4 are assessed in section B. And then if you're around for the next presentation about paper 4, AO5 will not be assessed because that won't be required either. Okay, those figures have been rounded up or down. Okay. So as I said, this is the writing paper, Crafting Language. Just to reiterate, a 2-hour paper instead of 145. Section A has 20 marks, and students create their own text based on unseen sources. There are usually 3 texts, sometimes there have been 4, but usually there are 3 texts linked by topic, so they're thematically linked. A genre is prescribed for them, and then the students have to choose their own audience, purpose, and context before they write their text. The source texts will be from a wide range of genres, not only those listed for study. Each source text will be taken from a different genre. So they get a collection of different genres in those 3, possibly 4 texts. Section B then is their commentary, and this is 30 marks. And here AOs 1, 2, 3, and 4 are assessed. And students write a commentary reflecting on their process in section A. And the commentary thereby focuses on analysis, evaluation, and the language choices made, the reshaping of the source texts to meet the genre, audience, purpose, and context. And squashed in at the bottom there, how contextual factors have influenced their language choices. And this is where students have to be a little bit savvy, a little bit careful, because the text that they create in section A is what they're analysing in section B. So what they have to do is they have to create a text that leaves breadcrumbs behind so that they can access those breadcrumbs when they're analysing it in section B. They've got to have the content for their text in section B. So they've got to be quite careful about what they choose to write and how they write it, because that's giving them the content for their own text later on. So they need lots of practice with this, but it's great and they do enjoy it. Okay, so in your resources, you may have the source booklet where the 3 texts are. As I said, there occasionally have been 4 texts. And you can see, if you have a look at them, how they are thematically linked. I'm not going to ask you to read all those 3 texts from the source booklet, but I will tell you the titles of them so that you are aware. Text A is called Music Therapy. Text B is The Power of Music, which is a BBC website discussing a television documentary series. What was text A? Let me just go back for you. Text A is an actual interview. So it is the written interview down. The following text deals with all the potential clinic and psychological benefits of music therapy, and it's excerpts from a written record of an interview conducted with a music therapist based at Cambridge Children's Hospital in the UK. So that's the interview. B, there is an edited article from BBC, and text C is an edited website. So you can see how the text, the sources are all different genres. You don't have to read them all. We will be focusing on some of them, but only parts of them, and I will talk through them as we go. So, as stated, they're thematically linked by context and issue. Recent iterations have been the following. Sustainable fashion was in January 22. June 2022, the International Appeal of Sports. January 2023, Fairy and Folk Tales. June 23, Trees in Urban Environments. January 24, Photography. And the one that we're going to be looking at, as I've just said, June 24, Music Therapy. Excuse me. So the writing genres, the specification indicates what writing genres they should explore and investigate as part of their preparation. So, I do apologise, I seem to have a croaky throat. So students need to have covered lots of different genres. They will have done this down the school for their GCSE, for example. And it doesn't prescribe, though, which ones are going to be set for the A-level. So they have to cover the following. Speeches. They've appeared 6 times, speeches and talks, since January 2017. Articles have appeared 4 times. Blogs have appeared 4 times. Scripts have appeared only once. So, sorry, that skipped on there. So you can see probably the most popular of all are speeches. However, you cannot afford to just focus on speeches. You have to do all the different text types because they don't know what's going to come up. Right, let's focus on section A. This is a typical question for section A. The rubric really doesn't change apart from the specified topic. So here you can see, you can find it in your question booklet as well, that you may have it in your resources. However, it's on the screen for you, so you don't think you have to find that. Read text A, B, and C, always. Before answering question 1, write your answer in the space provided. Using the text in the source booklet, write the text for a speech about the benefits of music therapy. Obviously, as I said before, that genre is provided and it may be different. And then the actual specified topic may change. In this case, it's music therapy. You may include additional material drawn from your own knowledge and experience. However, they have to address all 3 texts or 4. Okay. They can draw on their own knowledge, but the idea is to use the information they've read in order to create their text. Choose your own audience, purpose, and context, and then complete the grid below. 20 marks are available. So the students need to write who they're aiming their speech at, what's the purpose of their speech, and what's the context behind this speech. And we'll go into those in a little bit more detail. So, prior learning. As I said a moment ago, most of the knowledge and skills have been built, have been addressed before from a very early stage, and you're building on these. They were building probably from primary school right the way through GCSE level and now to A level. Even very young pupils learn about the conventions of, say, newspaper articles and begin producing front pages in their English lessons and maybe little speeches and talks about things right from an early age. So this is just building on that. This domain content is built up, as I said, in GCSE or IGCSE, where most specifications contain an element of writing for different audiences, purpose, and in different styles. So then the specification becomes a little bit more detailed. Importantly, in section B of paper 1, that was a recasting, creative and editorial task. And therefore, this is a progression of paper 1. Okay, it's a genuine developmental paper that builds on paper 1. As you can see, they are actually all interlinked. A little activity for you here. It's very general and very, very quick as well. So when you are teaching, whether you have done or whether this is new to you, what do you tell your students? What method should they use when they are approaching this question? So the students have learnt about everything in school. They've gone into the exam hall and they open up their paper and their, the question paper and also their source booklets. What do they do? You can write in the chat box, but really, I'm not necessarily looking for, I just want you to think about this. So imagine the students walking in, and lots of them will be very nervous. A level is a big step for them. It is often opening the doors to their future education and their career choices, possibly. So they need to go in with a little bit of confidence, which is hopefully what we're trying to build within each of them. And what should they do? Okay, no, are you all there? I hope you're there. Please don't fall asleep on me. So what I suggest is that here, how should they approach it? Let's have a look. These are only suggestions, but obviously they're going to look at the text and look at the task. Which order they do that? I strongly suggest that they read the question, because just reading the 3 texts, they've got no focus point. They've got no idea as to how they're going to channel that information back to the task. So I would say that the first thing they should do is actually read the task in front of them. What is the genre of the text they are going to have to write? So that as they're reading, they can be putting this into those cogs in their brain as to how this is all going to be processed. So If they know that stipulated genre, they can make annotations with clear focus. And I'm not sure that they'll make annotations the first time of reading, but as they read text A, they might then skim over it and put some highlights in. They may be able to read and annotate at the same time. You know your cohort and who is capable of doing that and who might need a second read. But at least they know where to focus. If they just generically read all those three texts and then they think, right, what do I need to do with them? I think it's sort of back to front way of approaching the task. Okay. Then they go to the source booklet and they read and annotate carefully. This exam is a little bit longer than papers 1 and 2, and for a 2-hour exam, you can easily split it 50-50, so an hour for each of the sections. So it wouldn't be inappropriate for reading and annotating for possibly 20 minutes. They might not use all of their annotations or their highlighted points, but at least they're beginning to focus, channel their thoughts into one direction, which would be to create a speech. The 40 minutes remaining there would be to craft their speech, which includes planning, the all-important planning, and then the checking. Okay, so I've actually put that a little bit later because once they have annotated, they need to then start thinking, sitting back. Don't panic about everybody else who's writing. This is your exam and this is your turn to shine. So sit back and think, right, what kind of a speech am I going to make? Who is it going to be directed to? What kind of an audience? We'll talk about that in a moment, but there's often more than one type of audience. What's the purpose of my text? What am I trying to achieve with my speech? And then what's the context behind it? What's the setting, the background, maybe it's the historical context or the social context, whatever that context may be. And then they need to be noted in those appropriate boxes on the question sheet. Planning, writing, and checking are part of that process as well. Maybe you want to tell your students that instead of 20 minutes to annotate, it's a 30-minute process, which is reading, annotating, and planning. And then it's a 25-minute writing task and a 5-minute checking task. You know your students, but these are the parameters that you need to start thinking about when they approach the task, because those exam techniques are very important, as well as the content of knowledge. They need to know how to actually approach the task as well. Okay, any questions? Yes, Ivy, yes, they have to reference all three texts. I'll come to that in a moment, but the stipulation is that they should at least have 50% of their text is referencing those three texts. They can add their own information, but they do have to reference all three. And if they ignore a text, they are running the risk of not being able to achieve those higher bands. So yes, they do. Okay, so the suggested genres for study in paper 3 feature articles, journalist review, interviews, speeches, travel writing, biographies, travel writing blogs and things, biography reviews, all of those easily. Web pages, blogs, I suppose, comes into the travel writing. Basically now there's all sorts out there, but students are very aware of them, of the different reading genres that are there. And so when they come to read their three texts, they're actually quite comfortable with reading them. Candidates should be familiar with the codes and conventions of all of these. So what is included in an article? What do we need in a speech? How do we write a review? Things like that. They need to consider these not only for what's involved or included, but from a lexical, discursive, geographical, syntactical, and semantic point of view. And we have covered some of those in papers 1 and 2. So this is just revisiting some of this information. What moves them upwards on the grade level? Quoting more from the text or using their own sources? No, it's not necessarily what is in there, it's what they've written and how they've written it. So we'll come into the mark scheme and whether it's a critical evaluation or not. using the information, but they have to have written, included at least 50% of those texts. So, and then it's how they've crafted, because this is an actual writing exam, it's how they've actually done that. So when we look at the mark scheme in a little bit more detail shortly, I'm not sure which is your first name. Is it Alamu there, or is the long Tekle Michael? Is that your first name? I really apologise, I'm not pronouncing it correctly. Okay, the only meaningful way for them to do this actually is by reading, researching, and guided instruction, analysis, and evaluation. And this paper, paper 3, is great because it's a genuine progression into paper 4, where the students have to do a lot of their own research. They need to practice by looking at and writing their own examples, looking at past papers, looking at past responses, sharing those with your students is really important. Looking at the mark scheme, looking at the indicative content, all of these documents should be shared with your students. They're all important teaching tools. So, and candidates are asked to nominate the context of their writing. So let's have a look at that for a moment. What does it mean? What sorts of factors might they choose? And how might these factors affect how they approach their writing? So, contextual factors that you'd encourage your students to look at. You can write them in the chat box if you like. It's very quick because the presentation does run forwards very quickly, and we don't have time to stop. But this is an ideal scenario that it's a takeaway activity that you think you can talk with your students. What do you think is meant by contextual factors? What would you think is important to include in a response? And you might, if this was face-to-face, we would discuss it and I would talk it in depth, because face-to-face tends to be for a whole day rather than just for 2 hours. So let's have a look what you might have thought and that you hope that you could draw out of your students. And if not, then this is how you introduce them to these ideas. That there might be geographic or regional factors. Where is the speech taking place? Where has it taken place? Social factors as well, such as gender, age, ethnicity, socioeconomic class, and maybe their level of education as well. It could be that there's an interest group there as the contextual factor. Obviously, this is not exhaustive, and it's partially drawn from a document called Getting Started. I've got a copy, my printed out copy here, but Getting Started here, issue 2, is really important. And if you go into the Getting Started, I think you've got a copy in your delegates pack, I'd hope you have, that this pack refers to suggested plans and activities for all the papers, but it's actually very important. And on page, I hope I have got the page right, 28. Yeah, on page 28 of Getting Started, there's lots of information about paper 3, the writing paper, which gives you lots of nice information that you can use in your classrooms as well. Going from week to week, different plans that you can use, week 7 to 8, week 9, week 10, and so on. So lots of information there that I want to draw your attention to. Age, the sex, yeah, the gender, absolutely, yeah. Well done. Thank you, Ivy. These contextual factors might affect the ways in which candidates use or vary their lexical, grammatical, semantic, pragmatic, discursive, and graphological elements of their response. Yeah, so you need to go over all those aspects with them, and I think you will know about them now because I mentioned them in papers 1 and 2, and if not, they're in the mark scheme. And it would make sense to engage with them about this. Get them talking, get them understanding. Context, I think they will have covered context further down the school, and they had to know about context for their IGCSE, so it shouldn't be too new for them. Looking at the purpose, so what's the purpose in this case of a speech? And obviously, texts tend to have more than one purpose. It could be to inform, to educate, to argue, to persuade, lots of different things. To inform, persuade, describe, argue, to entertain. Yeah. So it could be one or more of these. And they write that as well. They don't just limit that when they're writing in the purpose column on that question sheet. They don't just write one. If they think it is to inform and persuade, then they write both. If it's to inform, persuade, and argue a point, maybe, or entertain, yeah, they can write as many purposes as they think is relevant. But they do have to, then if they do write those, they do have to mention them when they actually write their text. These are all familiar again to the GCSE students, and if they've not, then they will need to be revisited. I should think they need to be revisited anyway. It's worth having in mind that even adding to the relevant box at the top of their section A response, a primary and a secondary purpose. Yeah, so they could write down that there are two purposes, but one is more important than the other. So they could say one is primary and one is secondary. That would be wonderful. Okay. And then these things can be discussed in the commentary. Remember, everything that they write in section A are the breadcrumbs for section B commentary. So everything, even the title, we'll talk about that as well, the title that they choose, and it's ideal to have a title of their text because they can bring that out in the commentary as well. Everything that they write should be with a purpose that they can then mention in section B. Yes, absolutely. A purpose can be to critique something. Yeah, if that's relevant, absolutely it can. What's the purpose of the speech? To critique something. Absolutely. Moving on to audience. I said a little moment ago that or how audience factors it might affect their writing. Typical audiences could be plural, age again, gender, ethnicity, socio-economic class. These are obviously connected and will impact ways in which the candidate can deploy their lexical, grammatical, syntactical, semantical, discursive, graphological elements in their work. Almost becomes a song because they come up all the time. And it is worth noting that it's worth considering the significance of the demographic that's covered in detail in the mark scheme. The idea there may be more than one audience. You might have an audience of male and female elderly people. You might have an audience of different age, a cross-section of ages and genders. So that's how the audience can be. It's not one specific audience, just like the purpose. It can be multifaceted. In order to attain a level 4, which is where we want students to aim for, unless we know that they are capable of going straight in at level 5, but a good level to aim for is level 4. And in approaching this, it's crucial as to how they link language, context, audience, and purpose in their writing. So they need to be able to link this, that it's not disjointed. They need to know that their text works, that their speech works, that it's using the purpose and the context, and their audience is all, if you will, mixed together, and that the function of the text, the purpose of the text is working. It's effectively structured. It's consistently accurate. This consistency applies understanding of audience and function. So the writing of the speech is that connection with the audience, the understanding of the audience, and the function of what's going on there, what the purpose of the speech is. The text should present data in an original and consistently engaging manner. Are you going to fall asleep while you're reading the speech, or is it something that keeps constantly dynamic, it's moving and it's engaging? These things are actually taken directly from the mark scheme. in order for the text to be successful, it has to hit those marks. Just looking down at the chat box there. So using the sources here, there will be 3 or possibly 4, usually 3. And this is, Ivy, I think, addressing your question. Candidates should aim to reference all of them. That said, they shouldn't worry unduly about equal coverage, but they do need to mention all of them, but not maybe with the same weighting. In some cases, they will find particular items more engaging or more obviously suited to the needs of their writing, and it will be natural for them to make proportionately more use of those. I always say that encourage your students, please, to write about things that they have some knowledge and that they're comfortable with. It's no use asking them at this level to write about things that they can't write about. So yes, they do need to mention all 3 texts, but they have to pick on the ones that they know that they can focus on, and the variety that will hit those assessment objectives that they are actually that suit them, sit well with them. It will be difficult, however, to attain marks in the higher levels if they completely ignore one of the texts. So this really is a skill, editorial skill, and it's an important part of the task, and it might need some time to help them understand it and be comfortable with it, and also to practice it. This Getting Started guide, as I mentioned before, states that at least 50% of students' own text must be based on the source text. They may use their own knowledge, experience, or opinion for the remainder. Okay, nicely moving on here. The progression. How all the papers are linked, how there's the development between them, the progression between the papers. In preparation for paper 1, candidates should have become familiar with the codes, conventions, and discursive patterns following those text types. For example, the articles, speeches, posts to online channels, if you remember when I talked about these last week, reports. And what they do for paper 3 is they have to add to the repertoire in terms of the ways that they can analyse and evaluate these text types which appear in the source booklet. So it's that natural progression of what they did in paper 1 is now in more detail, where they have to analyse it and evaluate it. As we've seen, some text types come up reasonably frequently, especially speeches. However, please don't just focus all your lessons on speeches. In order to be successful, they should consider the strength of their mental picture. And I think this is important, and I'm sure you are aware of this anyway. And I did mention this, I think, in paper 1, you know, if it's a speech, can they visualize themselves actually giving it a speech? If it looks like a speech, quacks like a speech, walks like a speech, duck, then it is a speech. But it has to look like it. They have to envisage themselves actually giving it. If it's an article, can they actually envisage it on a page or a screen? Does it look like an article? Does it look like an essay? Or does it look like a speech? You know, it has to look like what it is. These are referred to the concessions of the task, and therefore they are important. If they simply write an essay, then it's unlikely to flourish and get enough marks to get them in those higher bands. It holds them back if it's just an essay. It has to be generically convincing, a version of the thing which is stipulated in the task. I can't stress that enough. It has to look like a speech. It has to perform like a speech, or an article, or a report, or a blog. In order to do that, candidates need to have access and practice. They need to read articles. They need to listen to speeches. They need to read blogs. I'm sure they do, but they don't maybe realise the importance of what they're listening to on YouTube, and what they're reading, as to the concessions that those texts have. So you need to make sure that they are focused and they do understand the different concessions of the different text types. They need to be aware of the appropriacy of what they're doing for the audience that they have chosen. So, for example, a crowd of younger teenagers is likely to respond better to some approaches to speech giving, for example, than a group of adult delegates to a conference. So the actual speech itself, how it's written and how it's directed towards the audience. If it's an older audience, the speech will be different. The semantics, the lexical aspects of it will be different. If they're writing towards a crowd of younger teenagers, then they're going to include things that make it relevant to them. So they have to think of their appropriate language and how they're directing their speech and communicating with their audience. Again, signposting is key here. They need to ensure that the examiner, the marker, can see that they're addressing the task and that the audience for it, they're in meaningful ways. So the examiners have to see what they're doing is what they're supposed to be doing, quite simply. And this could be through, as I've just said, lexical choices, grammatical, syntactical patterning, discursive style, organisation, the selection of content, and graphology. We talked about the graphology in paper 1 and in paper 2 as well. It's not just the presentation, how it looks on the screen, but also the discourse, really, markers that can be used, found in mark schemes as well. Okay, so let's have a look. In writing a speech or writing a presentation, candidates should consider, although it's not a prescription, opening and closing. Good morning, my name is, like I did at the beginning. Yeah, in a speech, it's the same thing. As soon as a student does that, this is a speech. Okay, it makes it different to an article. The use of different presentational techniques. Many speakers these days will use an audio or a visual clip. You can include them as well. The students can include them. And these could be indicated through the use of stage directions. I think we've got an example coming up that shows that as well. And they could be, for example, I would like to start by showing you a short clip of Vicky McClure, organiser of a choir for sufferers of dementia, in parenthesis, play clip. So signposts like that indicate to the marker or the examiner that this is a speech and that they've used different presentational skills. Great. The clip, though, obviously doesn't need to be scripted because that's not what this is all about. We're not going to waste time writing the actual audio script down. But it is one way to make clear that the candidate has read and understood at least one of the texts. Because if you look at, I think it's text A, it's one that includes Vicky McClure, the organiser of a choir for sufferers of dementia. So that is immediately including information from one of the texts. Okay, voice. This is obviously important as well. So can candidates make use of different voices in their speeches or articles? Well, the answer is yes. But how do they do that? So the use maybe of an anecdote or a guest speaker may be a way forward here and there. This could be a useful way of interpolating material from one of the set texts. So, for example, I was lucky enough recently to speak to Vicky online and she told me that. So that is reference to the text again, but it's using that to include a different voice, the voice of Vicky. But you don't need to include directly what Vicky said, but you might ask the students, the candidates, to pull out important information from the text that the candidate wants to use in their speech. The voice or plural voices, once again, should be matched to the content, the audience, and the function. It's all got to be relevant, directed towards the audience, directed towards the content of the speech, and then the purpose, the function of the speech itself. If the candidate's been asked to persuade their listeners to take direct action, then an attempt to enact this needs to be apparent in the text they produce. So they could do that. They can ask for example, a show of hands, the use of factoids. Sorry, I'm going to go back there because um, if the point there that I wanted to make, that if they want to persuade listeners to take direct action, then they can actually ask them to have a show of hands or to make a comment about something, and that can be added to the speech as well, or added into the article that's been written. But then moving on, I moved on too quickly, I'm sorry, that the use of figures and facts like the factoids, these can be drawn from the source booklet, or they can make them up as long as they are credible. Okay, so yes, students can invent facts and figures, but they have to be plausible. Methods for encouraging audience participation, like I said previously, is that show of hands responses, and that's to the show of action, to polls, and here stage directions and signposting is important. They can use direct or rhetorical questions. All of these are important in a speech. I think some of you might have used in your teaching an acronym, is it DAFOREST, that's quite widely used in education nowadays, the DAFOREST. It's direct address, using alliteration. Each of the acronyms stands for something that they could use in speeches. Facts, DAFOREST. O is opinions. R, rhetorical questions. E, emotions, so that's using the ethos, pathos, and logos aspect of writing speeches there. There are other examples, and candidates should be encouraged to research as widely as possible. Okay, the more that they practice, the more they're comfortable, and they have the experience of seeing and reading speeches, articles, and so on, the more that they know what they should be producing. And here I referred to YouTube a while ago. There are lots of TED Talks there so that they can access those. Use them in the classroom. Share everything that you've got and let them share with you. They probably have more knowledge about some things on multimodal aspects of speeches and articles now than maybe we do. So let them shine and educate us. Every day is a school day. Besides asking themselves, can I see myself giving it? Of course, let's turn the tables. And can I see myself listening to this speech and understanding it and engaging with it? So both sides of the table, so to speak, when they are looking at their work. Articles, moving on to this now. A little activity, but this is something also that we can take away, in fact, is that what concessions are in articles. And good, I'm glad it answered your question, Ivy, good. What concessions might articles have? And this is a takeaway activity as a teaching strategy to use in your centres, departments, and in the classrooms. So your list probably includes, yeah, articles need a headline, a byline, the date, a stand first, sometimes called a deck, crossheads, a picture with a caption, something to mention about that as well, and insert box maybe containing infographic information, excerpted, enlarged quotations from a notable source, but other things as well. So if you're not familiar with all of those, I suggest you get your students to research it for you and come back explaining what each of those, make sure they understand what they are. Okay. But what about what, when, where, who, how, and why structure? Doesn't matter what order, but in the paragraphs of we often teach students that in the paragraphs we have to include those in maybe the first paragraph or the second paragraph of an article, which is the immediate information for the reader. Literary rhetorical techniques such as alliteration and tricolon. I think that's in the DAFOREST acronym as well, I think. diforest. I think the last T is tricolon. Third person, possibly yes. Active, but add a passive voice if necessary. A pun, yes. A pun, draw the attention of the reader, maybe through the headline. Using past tense if you're reporting something, reported speech. Formal or semi-formal register, depending who the audience is. Take note of that. It may not be completely formal, depending on who it's directed at, what the audience is. Figurative language, of course. Any cliches, but be aware of those, please. Too many peppering in a text is not a good thing, but a cliche may be used. Stereotyping can be considered. Obviously, it's not a checklist. It's not something that is a checklist exercise that students have to do and include one of everything. It has to be appropriate and it has to be engaging with the reader, the audience, and of course, the examiner. Getting candidates to think about differences between reporting and editorializing. Every time I say that word, I stumble over editorializing. Might be a worthy activity. Life is fun, isn't it? It's great. I love it. Okay, a blog post. Let's move on to this. Blogs. This is important when I mentioned also about the imaging a little moment ago. Concessions are likely to include many of the features of an article or a diary. Blog post, it's the more modern version of an article or possibly the diary or the journal. Because of the style model that they used. However, some candidates effectively add in representations of things like menus, drop-down boxes, hyperlinks, buttons, like and subscribe options, polls, calls to action, advertising banners. Please note, this is not a design exam. This is not asking candidates to display their abilities on a completely recreate the format. This is an English exam. The content here is important, not the design of the page that they're writing, the graphology of it. But it is important that possibly things like that are added just to show that it is a blog post. If there is an image in an article, if there is an image in a blog, a simple box with a line through it that says image is sufficient. We do not need an art lesson either. Okay, an indicative layout such as a box with a space for picture is totally fine. They can write image in the diagonally across the box, whatever they want, but please, we do not want any drawings. I'm not an art teacher. So, general advice, let us move on. Candidates should make sure to finish well. They started well, let's make sure they finish well. Responses often start well, like speeches and articles, web pages, blogs, but then they finish like an essay because the student goes down a rabbit hole of what they're writing rather than concentrating as well on actually what it is they're writing and how it should look. And you know, the duck syndrome as well. If it looks like a duck, quacks like a duck, waddles like a duck, it is a duck. But if it doesn't waddle anymore at the end, then it is no longer a duck. Okay, it's no longer a speech, if you understand. So maybe to keep them focused, ask a student to think of that final killer line. Maybe it's something that they can think of when they're planning that focuses them back to the fact that is it an article or is it a speech? Something for the audience as a takeaway activity as they leave the wherever it is, the speech hall. Something to think about to go back to when they get home. Just something to bring the candidate back round to keeping them on track of what they're supposed to be doing. Maybe look at style models in specification, like I mentioned, issue 3. I mentioned graphological concessions. It's helpful make sure that they are aware of the graphology involved in this task. Make sure they're using material from all three texts, and make sure that they target function mode audience as carefully as possible. Keep on track. Go back to the task, go back to that question paper where they've got that table where it says genre, mode, context, audience. Keep them going back to that to keep them on focus. Practice is their best friend. I keep saying use those past papers, and there are an abundance of them on the Pearson Edexcel website, which we'll talk about later. Okie dokie, so some general advice as well. Probably one of the most difficult things is how they should take that approach to both tasks. How are they going to combine the section A and section B? So when they're selecting material from section A, they will be well advised to think actively about how they can reshape it and comment on it in section B. They should be gathering breadcrumbs, pre-identifying those lexical, grammatical, syntactical, discursive features of the new text that they're writing so that they comment on them then in their section B response. So they are the masters of their own destiny, if you will. Whatever they write in A is what they comment on B. So they make sure they have a plethora of information there that they're not going to be stuck when they have to comment on it. And it also makes that easier for the marker to follow as well. So when the examiner reads text A, they're going to be talking about these. I can see this is all there. And if they don't talk about them in section B, they'll think, what's going on? They've given me all this information and they've not mentioned them. Okay. All right. So this is another takeaway from the June 2024 paper. And it's going to be on a slide, I think, as well. It's the candidates have been instructed to write the text for benefits of music therapy, which is the question for this particular section A question. Read the three texts. I'm not going to ask you to do that for the sake of time today, but we need to think of an audience and why. What is it about this one particular which is attracting your interest? Particular text, has it drawn your interest more than the other two? But remember, all three have to be mentioned. And what's the purpose of the speech? What's the context of it? And then some extension. This is an activity that you can use with your students. Write the opening 100 words of a speech, and also write the last 50 words of your speak, making it as memorable as possible. It's a great activity to use with your students, and they don't actually need to use the whole of a text. They can pick on, aspects of texts A, B, and C. You can prescribe what they have to focus on. Don't overload them with using information from all three texts to start with. Actually, water it down a little bit and give them aspects of text that they can focus on. And you're not asking them to write a whole speech either. Just what are the purpose, the genre is given, what's the purpose, the audience and the context. And then also after they've done that, they could start to write the speech, the beginning of the speech, maybe a first paragraph of the speech, and then also the very ending as well. So that's great activities as well. Oh dear. Okay, Hina. Sorry. I'm glad you've joined though. Okay. Recording and document link, please. Yeah, at the beginning, I think Hansel, the host today, has already added that link, Hina, so you can access it as well. But don't worry, you're here now, which is the important thing. Okay, so that is a takeaway activity for you to use, as I say, centres, departments, classrooms, individual students, whatever suits your cohort. And for an activity here, we need to make sure you are aware of the indicative content, the IC, and the mark scheme. And in your delegate booklet, which page 3 was the assessment objectives. And if you go into the delegate booklet here on page 6, Then you have two tables, one of the IC at the top, and then you've got the mark scheme at the bottom, which is, remember, only for A05. Okay, A05 only for section A, 20 marks available. So let's move on. Using the grid from the mark scheme, we're going to place a section A response and find out where you think it fits, basically. So this is just something, it's a best fit scenario. If you're new to this, you might not be comfortable doing it, or you just want to dip your toe in the water and have a little think about how this could be assigned to a level. So in your delegate booklet on page 7 to 11, there is actually quite a long response from a candidate. It's called Maximising Music. From 7, you can see at the table above it, the genre is given, it's the speech. The audience that this student or this candidate has given, medical professionals, psychology experts, so two lots of audience. Purpose: to inform and persuade the audience to use music therapy. And the context is medical field of studies, applications of music. Okay, so those are what the student or the candidate wrote as their audience, purpose and context, and then their text is underneath it. As I said, it's actually quite long. It's 4.5 pages long, so please don't read all of it. Maybe just read the first paragraph, or the second one goes over the page. It starts, I will read it to you. It's handwritten, which makes it quite difficult, but just for ease here. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. How many of you were listening to a song on their car speaker while driving here? Oh, I see. Many of you. Many of you must be having rough mornings for which music helps you all to calm down. So that's the introduction. That's the start of a speech given by this candidate. Don't forget the title is important, Maximising Music. Okay, you might want to put that into a level, but I'm very aware of time at the moment. So skim read it, or just read that first paragraph, or even the second paragraph as well on page 8. But remember, we're marking positively, and I say this numerous times, we credit a student for what they write. We do not penalise them for what they are not doing. Okay, we're rewarding, not penalising. So you're looking for things to credit them rather than thinking, oh, that's wrong, and oh, that's wrong, and they spelt that wrong, and they've done that wrong. We're not looking negatively. We're trying to look positively at all students' work. We're looking to improve their chances of success, remember. Okay, so it's a best fit approach. Not everything in the descriptors. I was asked this, I think, the last presentation and possibly the presentation before. Do they have to have hit every bullet point in the mark scheme before they can go on to the next level? No, not everything in the descriptors has to happen for the answer to be placed in the band which stipulates them. So you can look at the mark scheme, for example, that I said to you, and yes, it may be level 3, or it's clear, it's relevant application, but they did something that it was discriminating and controlled, and it was logically structured, and that would tip them into level 4 as long as it was solid. They haven't just sort of dipped their toe in the water at that one as well. They've actually gone whole hog into it, and you think, yeah, it actually is discriminating. It tips them over the balance into a level 4. So yeah, they don't have to have hit all the bullet points. All right, let us look at, I don't know where you think it was. Nobody's put anything in the chat box, but don't worry. The candidate here was awarded a mark in level 4. So this is an activity you can look at in depth later on in your centres and analyse why you think it was actually given a level 4. And that's the aspect of the mark scheme that it applied to. I think in the end, what was it awarded? I've got it down here as it was actually awarded top of level 4, 16 out of 20. So it was right at the top, but not quite evaluative and critical enough to tip it into level 5, but it was the top of level 4. So if you're there, well done, give yourself a pat on the back. But it is marking activities are very informative and valuable to do within your centres in your departments so that everybody gets used to what is required at this level of qualification. Okay, so this is a well-being break, but I am actually aware of the time is already quarter past the hour. So we're going to possibly just have a quick bathroom break or refill of coffee, tea, whatever, water, whatever you may have, and get back together at about 20 past, so just a 5-minute break if possible. I'm going to stay here, so if you want to ask me some questions on the chat box while we're having the break, that's absolutely fine. But we do have some more slides to get through, and then also the support slides, which I don't want to rush through at the end. So let us move on. These online presentations are always so quick in a 2-hour period, but I hope you are gaining information and they're finding it useful. So off you go and come back. Okay? I'll have a drink as well. So what was the mark, Maria? It was 16 out of 20, level 4 for that last piece. Okay, so top of level 4. Okay. It was just lacking on its on the marks there for level 5, which made it critical and evaluative. It wasn't deemed to be enough in order to keep it into that level. Okay, but it was definitely the top of level 4. A great. Can we have exemplars, please? You have got your resource booklet, which has got the exemplars, the students' responses from this, and on the support slides at the end of the presentation, there are links to Edexcel Pearson website where you can get lots of past papers, examiner reports, mark schemes, and so on. Okay, and also maybe the support partner, Stephen Gillespie, may be joining us at some point today, in which case you can direct some questions of resources to him as well. Okay, the delegate pack doesn't have the sample responses, does it not, really? The I'm showing it to the camera at the moment. Delegate booklet, course title, understanding, blah, 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 blah. That's the delegate booklet, and that's the one that we're actually using in this presentation. There's also the source booklet, there's a mark scheme and a question paper, but this is the one we're actually using. And this one, when I'm referring to the pages, like I said, page 6 here, sorry, there's my scrawlings all over it, but this has the indicative content and the mark scheme, and then over the page, the next 4 pages or 4.5 pages, there is the candidate's response. So it's in the delegate booklet, Booly, okay. Please can I have the link? Scroll back, Hina, and also Vuli, to the link that Hansel, the host, put at the beginning in this chat box. I'll ask him if he's there. Hansel, could you just add the link again? Oh, thank you. Do you know what, Hansel? You're an angel. Thank you. He's listening at the same time. He's just added the link again for you there. Very grateful. Yeah, me too. That Hansel is on the ball. Fab, fab, fab. Okay, so if you go into that, you should have the delegates pack, and inside that, the different resources. You've got the question paper, mark scheme, source booklet. You should even have the specification. That's starting, what's it called? Getting started, starters pack. No, getting started, it's called. And within that delegate booklet, you will have the candidates' responses. Okie dokie. Constantly talking for 2 hours. Yes. 9 documents, but no candidate responses. Have a look, Ivy, in the delegate booklet. It's not delegate pack, delegate booklet. I'm showing you to the camera now. Here, delegate booklet it's called, not delegate pack. And it's within the booklet, it's inside the booklets. Paper 1 and 2 had. Sorry, I'm just going to turn my audio off so I can have a jolly good cough, because I'm sure you're not enjoying me coughing. I'm sorry, I really apologize for that. Okay. I hope you have found it. Um, hmm. If you're all having problems with that, it's something maybe that I need to go into your delegates pack. That I have the link for that somewhere as well, and I will go into the delegates pack rather than the trainers pack, which is what I have, and see what you have. Got the files from the start. Okay, Abel. Does that include the delegates booklet, which has the candidates' responses? So I'm actually going through that at the moment. That last response for section A took us up to page 11. And I'm now going on to section B, which starts on page 12 of the delegates booklet, not the delegates pack. Okay, the booklet is in the pack. Okay, let us boogie on. This is section B, and this is now where the students have to write a commentary on what they have been writing in section A. So, they've already developed the skills of framework. We talked about this in paper one. The framework, and if you look in the delegates booklet on page 12, you have the indicative content, which also talks about mode, field, function, audience, context, and so on. So that's important to go through with your students. And now they need to apply these skills that they had in paper one into their own script for section B of paper 3. A reminder being, we already established that in planning and writing, candidates should be planting those breadcrumbs, those seeds of things that they intend to write about in section B. For example, if you move over in your delegates booklet, what did they call it? Maximizing music. That was the title of that previous text that we just looked at, candidates' response. Maximizing music. You could obviously say it is the attraction of leading into the context. Here you've got maximizing music, you've got alliteration, maximizing the idea not only of music itself, but the use of music. So it could be used as a metaphor. And in this case, music is the answer. It's a metaphor as well. It's got some sibilance in there. It's a simple sentence. It's exclamatory. There's an exclamation mark there. And it's also the title maybe of a song. So use everything. Those breadcrumbs, even if they think it's obvious, they should still be using it and commenting on it. That's what the section B is all about. All the things that they could be commented. So we're not going to look at your first line, but remember that a title is so important in the text that they write, whether it's for section A or section B. Okay, they need to, when they comment on the title that they've written for section A. Hope that makes sense. Okay, so they're instructed to comment on the language. So basically, they are recasting those texts into the form of a text type of a speech. They're using that framework-based model. Remember all those things that we talked about in paper 2, phonological, discursive, pragmatic issues, all those things that we talked about in transaction of language. They should write in the first person because they wrote the text, so they are commenting on their text. Silly things like that, not silly, but obvious things like that are often missed. They should adopt a similar methodology for the one they used in paper 1 in section A when they were analysing as well. So all these papers are linked together. So what are these relevant language frameworks? Let's go on them. They are field, function, mode, audience, graphology, grammar and syntax, lexis and semantics, discourse and pragmatics. Levels, yeah, what's a framework and what's a level? We talked about this in paper 1 as well. Probably field, function, mode, and so on are frameworks, and the others are levels, although this is debatable according to the framework of English study by Ballard, in which they they said that it was different. It doesn't really matter as long as they refer to both frameworks and levels. And those are in your mark scheme or in your delegates booklet on page 12. Okay, mark scheme, if you've got that and you haven't got the delegates booklet, mark scheme is on pages 5, 6 and the top of page 7, I believe. Context is also stipulated as well. So not going to go through all of them, but field is defined as the subject matter, function as its purpose. So go through these with your students. As I keep saying, it's not Secret Service. This is all for me, and I'm going to only give you so much information. You share everything with your department, and also your centres, but especially with your students. It's got to be transparent. They have to know. Mode not stipulated, but it could be a multimodal text, and so this is worth commenting on by your students. Okay. For example, a YouTube clip could be immediately familiar to the candidate cohort that we're referring to now. They're on YouTube all the time. So here, they've got to select material that they want to use. This is something that we've got to keep going through here. I'm going to give you a taster activity here. That if you have the top part of text A in the source booklet, and I think I've also put it on the next slide, so don't panic about that. I've put the very top of it on the part that we're going to talk about. It's on the next slide, so you don't need to look. But if you want to look, it is at the top part of the text A in the source booklet, and that is page 3. We're only going to focus on the top part, and this is a takeaway activity you can use with your students to get them introduced to this. If you were doing the task, or if they were doing the task, what would they have chosen from this top part of the text in order to include in a speech? How would you have made it fit? What would you be focusing on? And so on. So here is the excerpt from the text. It starts with excerpts from the written record of an interview conducted with a musical therapist based at Cambridge Children's Hospital in the UK, and it goes down to the end of the paragraph where it says Angela Ruskin University. Okay. Anglia, not Angela. Anglia Ruskin University. Okay, so there's lots of information there, and on the next slide, I can highlight some things that you might have wanted to use in order to pull out, be selective in the information in creating a speech. How would you have made it fit in the remit? What would you be focusing on? And also things like lexis, grammar, syntax, and so on. So let's have a look. You might have picked on these things here. It's a written record, okay. Music therapy might be useful in context, audience, and purpose. Emotive language, positive, powerful. Ooh, alliteration, reinforced by alliteration. Loves her job, used to develop maybe and create voice. Key concept is physical and mental health challenges. Creating tone. I wanted to use music as therapy. And then creating persona in the last element there. So those are just some things. Remember, when these texts are sourced for an exam, it's also made sure that there's so much information there. There's a plethora of information that the candidates can draw on. It's never difficult for them to find things to talk about, to use in their selected genre. Okay, audience. If we collected this together, we could put it into practice of older prospective volunteers, providing information about ways that they can get involved in music therapy. They're at an online university of the third age event intended to inspire them. So imagine, therefore, that we've already started our speech by introducing ourselves and this is how it could look. So these few slides here are an example, this taster activity of looking at a part of a text, asking students to pull out relevant information that they might want to use, and then how would they create a speech from that? And this is an example then. We're going to use it to provide an example with stage directions. So after that brief prelude, here is a short video clip which will hopefully offer you some food for thought about the sort of people involved in music therapy and the work they do. Play pre-recorded video of Claire Roscorns talking about her work. Claire, I'm presuming that is voiceover, to a short sequence showing her at her workplace during which she interacts with patients. Hello everyone, my name is Claire and I've been working at Cambridge Children's Hospital for 6 years. I love my job. I was a primary school music specialist in a range of settings and I was happy enough. But when my nephew was unfortunately taken ill, blah, 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 blah. Okay. Young people with all sorts of problems, both physical and mental, come here and often their spirits are very low. It's quite astonishing how music can help them. Cut to Claire playing guitar for a small audience of inpatients who are looking rapt and singing along. So you can see how in writing this speech, voice is used, additional voice is used, and how it actually is addressing the audience. As a general rule, include the idea with your students that some risk-taking for candidates is actually a positive thing. Get them to step out of their comfort zone a little bit when they're practicing in the classroom, because this actually is seen quite positively by examiners. The advantages could be it's clearly a speech. It's been recast, so text A has been referred to, clear targeting of audience, different voices being used, audiences being engaged, rephrasing language from the text, plenty of opportunities for analysis and self-evaluation in section B. So those breadcrumbs are there. From a teaching point of view, these techniques should be recognisable. Okay, so section B, when the commentary is created on this particular speech, we could say the use of the noun prelude drawn from the field of music is tonally appropriate for the U3A members. Okay, commonplace metaphor, food for thought was used. Love, life affirming, truly felt is the positive message, is inspiring for the audience. Variation sentence type, we've got simple, compound, complex. This creating narrative, rhythm, pace and voice are all these things that the candidate can use in their commentary. This variation in sentence function, use of first person, you're actually asked to use it, but mention it, okay? Use of plausible contextual detail, that sick nephew makes her experience seem real, brings emotion into it as well. And an appeal to the audience using playing guitar. All sorts of things there. So this is something, have a look at the slides that you have in your pack, go through those few slides and see how the text has been recast into a speech, and then that has been used for the commentary. So there is a progression, even though it's just from a short part of the initial text, and that has to be then built on, obviously. So a takeaway activity, you can do that. You can use different parts of texts and do the same activity. First of all, go through that one as an example, and then you create your own. Okay. Graphology, I've mentioned this in the previous two presentations, in that it usually means how it's laid out with the presentation, but it might be worth thinking about this, extending this to discourse, and that is in the mark scheme that you can see and read about it. This is a language exam, remember, and so signposts are there, discourse markers are appropriate, and then they can be commented on as well. Terminology I mentioned at the beginning has to be important. So if a candidate's not sure what logos, ethos and pathos mean, then avoid it. Word count, as always, there's no answer. And I've mentioned this before, 700 could work quite well. 1,000 could work well or just be a modest result, okay? It has to be orderly, relevant, informed, accurate and well expressed. Okay, so we're not going to have a time to do this one, but these slides here is the a little bit about the field function. We've talked about this before, so I'm going to go through these. They're in the mark scheme that you need to have a look at and make sure your students are aware of the field function mode and so on. Do not ask your students just to feature spot. Whatever they talk about, they have to explain, explore and evaluate critically. Candidates at higher levels are more able to describe the examples they provided using relevant terminology to analyse the intended effect of their writing techniques. That's from the examiner report as well. And it goes on as well. So please remember that it's not feature spotting commentaries that your students do. They have to go into depth. There's a marking activity, and we are very much running out of time today. That in your delegates booklet here, it is on pages 14 to 19, and this is a commentary of the text that was previously written. So the mark scheme is on page 13, and the text starts on pages 14, 15, and 16, 17, 18, and 19. It's very long. I'm going to give you what it is, and then you can take this away and have a look at it in depth and go through where you think this level would have been had you been giving it that level. Okay, it's the best fit approach, obviously, and they awarded it here 20 out of 30. Remember, section B is out of 30, so this was a strong level 4. It sat firmly in the middle of level 4 being discriminating controlled application. That starts on pages 13. No, the mark scheme is on page 13, and the actual response goes from page 14 up to page 19. It's handwritten. It's quite, it takes a bit of time to go through, but you have there the result that that candidate got. All right, so strategies for teaching. There are some theories that may be used, but obviously this is not an exhaustive list. Let the students do their own research. They will come up with many more theories, and but these are some of the ones that are useful potential, especially Google Scholar that you mentioned at the bottom there. One of the joys of teaching this paper 3 is that it prepares the students for paper 4, which is very much based on their own research. Pearson, may I add, is not endorsing these links, they're just pointing out their existence. Make sure, please, that you check everything before using it in the classroom or making recommendations for wider reading. Things get changed over time, so make sure that you check it first before giving links to your students. Strategies for teaching. I'm going to whiz through these now before I then go on to the support that Pearson Edexcel gives you. You can read the slides. Levels 1, 2 and 3 are on here. What I have, and I'm sure some of the people here know me, if you've seen me on presentations before, or you've been to some of my face-to-face presentations, that I always say that level 1, I have the analogy of people at the beach or people at a swimming pool, and it's limited. They dip their toe in, but they're not very confident at doing any more than that. They're identifying things on a simple level, variable accuracy. They're not quite sure, but they'll have a go, if you will. They dip the toe in the water. Level 2 is a key word in the mark scheme here is basic or general. And this is where I think that candidates are paddling. They'll sort of go further than dipping their toe in. They'll paddle a little bit They will say something but not really go any further with explaining it. That they say, for example, bro is an example of Lexis, which should be brother. Great, but it doesn't really say anything apart from that. So they're paddling. Level 3, they're becoming more secure reviewers. This keyword in this on the mark scheme is always clear and relevant. So if their students are in level 3, what they're writing is clear and it's relevant. They're explaining features. Okay, they might say that the noun bro possibly shows the influence of standard American English on this variety, may result in the spread of the result of the spread of US media. So this is where it's becoming clear and it's becoming relevant, and they're explaining. Whereas at level 4, they start to explore, and this is where the level 3, that it was clear and relevant, they were swimming. Okay, they were swimming in there, not doing much more. It was clearly that they could swim, yeah. But now that they're exploring, they've got their snorkel and mask on and they've gone under the water and they start to explore things. They know what they're looking for. They become more discriminating and they're exploring their environment. They're exploring a text, and they're actually starting to delve a little bit deeper than staying on the surface of the water. Okay, they're looking more closely. And there is some attempt at evaluation, but maybe nothing secure. They're sort of having a go. They're snorkeling and they're having a go. However, when they get to level 5, they are critically evaluating. They are deep sea diving in my analogy here. Level 5, this exploration. So they explain, then they explore, and this exploration goes further. And they start to analyze and evaluate. The methodology is secure and they're evaluative, securely evaluative. Okay, and their journey has been entirely worthwhile. I mentioned right at the beginning that this could be a linear route or a modular route, and on this slide it does explain this and clarify it a little bit more, and there are other combinations of the above, and your centre could contact Pearson Edexcel and see how it could suit your centre if that's what you wish to do. We have not got time for a discussion, although we've got something here. I've seen the document. Okay, good. Rania, would you advise clear topic sentences in the commentary showing which framework they explain? Yeah, I always think when a student is writing a paragraph, that a topic sentence, if that's the way that their brain works, then that's fabulous, because it keeps it ordered in their mind, and it means when they then write more detail in the rest of the paragraph, that they're then detailing what was in their topic sentence, and that's a perfectly good way forward. Absolutely. But remember those levels that I just talked about. We want snorkelers and deep sea divers. We want level 4 and level 5. So they need to be aware of the assessment objectives at those levels in order to hit those targets. Some support from Pearson Edexcel. This is the website that I've referred to so far today in this presentation. If you go into this website that you can see on that slide, there's a plethora of free resources available as support for you, including teaching and learning materials, which have the specification, which is the issue 3, past papers, training content, teaching, learning materials, forms and administrative. If you need help with documents to help you with admin, that's in there as well. Exemplars, lesson plans, course planners, much more. Past training content, as you can see. Exam material is in there from past papers, which includes the papers themselves, the mark schemes and examiner reports. So there's such a lot on that particular page. Results Plus is a tool that teachers may find useful in your analysis of your students and in your own teaching performance too. It's a free tool, and you can see in-depth data on the performance of a candidate, class or school in reference to a particular cohort. So you can use this and you can see which questions, the specific points students have performed well in or maybe poorly in, and use this in your choices for revision, resits, and your classroom teaching. So Results Plus is a really useful tool. Exam Wizard as well. It's also a free tool that you can find useful. It produces exercises and past papers, and it's constantly building as well. Okay, it works in conjunction with Results Plus as well to help create exam practice resources. Access to scripts. This is an online service as well, which is free. And it allows you to see all your students' marked exam papers free of charge. It's available for all qualifications and will be accessed through Edexcel online. The scripts, please note, do not have examiner annotations on them, but I think it's a very useful tool to have, and you can see this and use it alongside Results Plus as well. Apart from the free resources, there are some paid for resources. New students books 1 and 2 are for the AS and A level. Remember, as advanced subsidiary, and then the A2. All 4 papers need to be sat in order to gain access to the full qualification. And that is, and this one and on the next slide as well are designed for anyone following this latest Pearson Edexcel International A-Level English Language course, teachers and learners who want the best preparation for exam success and progression. However, I must also add that although Pearson is committed to supporting teachers and students, it is not necessary to purchase endorsed resources in order to deliver our qualifications. You can use any resource that you seem fit or you deem fit to use for your cohort that you know so well. But these here are specifically created in order to provide curriculum matched, ready to use resources that save you time. Woohoo, we need time saving, and support for high quality teaching, allowing learning in a local context but to a global standard. And that pack is available for teachers. Okay. Subject partner support. I don't know if Stephen is with us, Hansel, I'm not sure, but here he is. He is the new subject partner support for English, and there are his contact details. So if you need to contact him for any questions that you may have on any of the resources that you mentioned in the chat box, then please do so, and he will be there to help you. Pearson Professional Development Academy is here for you if you're looking for further training. It's high quality professional development, and it's key to delivering impactful learning. So to help you successfully implement international GCSE and international A-level qualifications in your centres, that we offer a range of training from introductory sessions to in-depth customised learning experiences. For more information, you can contact that link at the bottom there, Pearson PD Academy, in order to sign up for it. Okay, and another piece of information here, support for you. You can get regular updates here from Pearson Edexcel if you sign up to our newsletters here. Be the first to hear about upcoming products, services, training, and free trial offers, informative webinars that you can join, and so much more. So if your centre signs up for that, just click on the QR code or there is a form to fill in from that link, and keep yourself connected. We do have a little bit of time for questions. I apologise that the second part of this presentation was a little bit rushed, but in a 2-hour presentation, we don't actually have chance for you to do much marking per se. It's not the situation where we're face to face and we can spend lots of time going through a candidate's responses and picking out issues that we think are relevant. When it's online, that luxury isn't really available, but you do have the resources there, and you do have the results that were awarded for each of those responses, and the examiner reports are available as well. If you have any questions, you could mention them now. Abel, yeah, I hope that it has been wonderful. And also to Telemichael Alemu, very helpful, thank you. I really hope it has, because I do this because I'm passionate about it, and I want to give as much information as I possibly can from my experience over the years in order for you to do exactly the same with your students. You impart your passion and your love for this subject and give them the confidence to strive forward and achieve and smile their way through. They can do this, and you've just got to give them all the confidence in the world and support them on their journey, because they can get through this. And each of the papers is linked, so when you're teaching it, it's not teaching 4 separate papers. You're actually interlinking all the content for each of the 4, and they get built upon. And then paper 4, which is the final one later this week, is when they get the chance to shine and show their research abilities, and they can show their independence as well. They sort of had their introduction to independence when they were creating their text today, whether that be article or blog or speech or whatever, that they could do that, and then they could comment. This paper today was completely for them. They created the text and they commented on their work, which is wonderful. And then paper 4 takes that element even further. So, Vuli, yes, you are more than welcome. Let's just move on to the thank you for your patience today. That you found the information useful. Please just add a note in the chat box whether you're new to this or whether you're experienced, and share the experience with everybody, because, as I always say with tongue in cheek a little bit, we're not the Secret Service here. We need to spread the word that English is the most fabulous subject, and we can all help each other to help our students succeed, which is the ultimate goal, isn't it? And I hope you are going to join me on Wednesday for the final presentation of paper 4. And if you do, I look forward to your company. And if you can't make it, then from my heart, I say thank you for joining me today.